Before we dive into today's terrifying tale, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss a spine-chilling story. Let's get into it. The Night Visit.
It was Halloween night, and I was excited to spend it in the comfort of my home. I had decorated my living room with cobwebs and carved pumpkins that flickered with candlelight, creating the perfect spooky ambience. Outside, the laughter of children echoed through the streets as they ran from door to door, their costumes bright and festive against the dark sky. I settled into my favorite spot on the couch, a bowl of candy by my side, ready to dive into a marathon of classic horror films. As the first movie began, I felt a twinge of unease wash over me, but I shook it off. Halloween was supposed to be fun, right? But then, my phone buzzed, breaking my concentration. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, curious. All I could hear was heavy breathing. My stomach dropped. I waited for a few moments, hoping the caller would speak, but there was only silence. I hung up, brushing it off as a prank. I had heard about people calling on Halloween just to mess with others. A few minutes passed, and then my phone rang again. This time, it was the same number. I frowned, feeling a chill run down my spine. I hesitated but picked up. "Hello? Who is this?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. Again, only heavy breathing met my ears. I slammed the phone down, feeling my heart race. I turned back to the movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping over me. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. After a while, I started to receive calls at regular intervals, and each one felt more unsettling than the last. Each call contained whispers or distorted laughter, chilling my blood. At one point, I could have sworn I heard my name being murmured, making my skin crawl. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but the street was quiet, the Halloween festivities continuing around me. My imagination must be running wild, I thought. I was home alone, wrapped up in a Halloween horror marathon. Of course, I was going to be a little jumpy. But when the calls continued, I started to feel an overwhelming sense of paranoia. I tried to distract myself with the movie, but my phone buzzed again, and this time, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Who could it be? I answered cautiously, my voice trembling slightly. "Stop calling me!" I shouted into the receiver, hoping to scare whoever it was away. But all I got in response was that eerie, heavy breathing. I threw the phone onto the couch, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare. I called my best friend, hoping to find some comfort in her voice. When she answered, I could barely hold back my panic. "Hey, it's Halloween, and I keep getting these weird calls," I said, my voice shaky. "They're really starting to freak me out." "Just ignore them. It's probably just some kids messing around," she replied, trying to reassure me. I wanted to believe her, but something deep inside me knew this was different. I felt watched, as if unseen eyes were boring into me from the darkness outside. As the night wore on, the calls became more frequent, more personal. Each time I answered, it felt like they were getting closer, more intimate. Just as I thought I could calm down, I received a final call before midnight. The voice was distorted and low, sending shivers down my spine. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," it said, dripping with malice. My heart raced, and I felt ice settle in my veins. I was no longer just scared. I was terrified. This was no prank. I needed to take action. I glanced at the clock and realized that it was time to confront whatever was lurking in the shadows. Little did I know that this would be just the beginning of my nightmare. After that last call, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread settling in my stomach. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting it to ring again. Each buzz sent a fresh wave of anxiety coursing through me. I turned the volume down, hoping to drown out the sound, but it only heightened my awareness of every creak and rustle in the house. The festive sounds from outside started to fade as the neighborhood grew quieter, and the trick-or-treaters returned to their homes. I wrapped myself tighter in a blanket, seeking comfort in its softness, but it felt futile. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit there and wait for the next call. As I paced around my living room, my eyes were drawn to the window. The streetlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across my yard. That's when I saw him, a shadowy figure standing at the edge of my property, just beyond the reach of the light. My heart dropped. I squinted, trying to make out any details, but all I could see was a dark silhouette. I felt paralyzed, caught between the urge to run and the instinct to stay hidden. Who was he? Why was he standing there? I reached for my phone again, contemplating whether to call the police, but the thought of making another call only intensified my fear. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, and I jumped. It was another unknown number. My hands trembled as I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hello." The line was silent for a moment before I heard it, a low, raspy voice that sent chills down my spine. "I see you." I dropped the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like the world around me had shrunk, leaving only me and that voice. My mind raced, replaying everything I'd heard. Was he watching me right now? I darted to the window, peering through the curtains, but the figure was gone. Panic set in as I realized how vulnerable I felt. I could be watched without even knowing it. I felt trapped in my own home, the walls closing in on me. The thought of that voice lingering in the air made my skin crawl. Desperate to regain some sense of control, I decided to do what any sensible person would do. I called the police. After a few rings, a calm voice answered, and I poured out my fears. "I'm receiving threatening calls, and someone has been lurking outside my house. I think I'm being watched." The operator assured me that they would send someone to patrol the area, but I could sense their skepticism. "We'll take a look around, ma'am," they said, but their tone felt dismissive. "Just try to stay inside and keep your doors locked." I hung up feeling even more alone, the reality of my situation hitting me like a brick wall. The police would be here, but what if I didn't make it until then? I needed to think fast. With trembling hands, I began to prepare. I gathered anything I could use for protection: a heavy lamp, a kitchen knife, and my phone, which I kept close. I set up my laptop and logged into a security app one had never bothered to use before. The camera showed me a view of the front porch, and I hoped it would give me some peace of mind. As I sat back on the couch, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the weight of my fear. I glanced at the clock. It was just past 11 p.m. The calls had stopped for now, but I knew that wouldn't last long. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sounds of the outside world growing quieter. It was as if the night itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, a loud thud jolted me from my thoughts. It came from the back of the house. My heart raced, and I jumped to my feet, holding my breath. I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help, but then I remembered I was not going to let fear control me. With shaky steps, I moved toward the source of the noise. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out every other sound. Each creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. When I reached the back door, I hesitated, hand poised over the handle. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay beyond. "You can do this," I whispered to myself, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. Then, just as I was about to open the door, my phone buzzed again. I jumped, nearly dropping it. I glanced at the screen, and my heart sank. It was the same unknown number. I could feel the blood drain from my face. I knew I had to confront my fear, but deep down, I wasn't ready for what awaited me on the other side. The buzzing from my phone was relentless, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The screen illuminated my trembling hands as I stood frozen in place, staring at the door. Every logical part of my brain screamed for me to run, to hide, but curiosity and dread held me captive. What awaited me on the other side? I gripped the door handle tightly, feeling the cold metal against my palm. Just a quick peek, I told myself, just to see if anyone is there. With a deep breath, I turned the handle and pulled the door open. The night air hit me like a slap, cool and biting. I scanned the darkened yard, straining my eyes for any sign of movement. The porch light flickered ominously, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the darkness. For a brief moment, I felt foolish standing there, my heart racing as I searched for something, or someone, that might not even be there. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" The words hung in the air, swallowed by the silence. All I could hear was the distant rustle of leaves and the soft hum of the night. I took a cautious step outside, the wooden floor creaking beneath me. The chill in the air made me shiver, but I felt oddly compelled to move forward. I took another step, glancing around the yard, but everything looked still and empty. Then I noticed it, a dark shape near the edge of my property. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to make out what it was. Just a tree, I told myself, just a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just my imagination. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again, snapping me back to reality. I fumbled to pick it up, my breath hitching as I saw that it was the same unknown number again. Part of me wanted to block it, to ignore it completely, but another part of me felt the need to answer. Maybe they know something, I reasoned. Maybe they can help. I pressed the answer button, holding the phone to my ear. "Hello," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence answered me, heavy and thick. I was about to hang up when I heard it, a soft, sinister chuckle echoing through the line. "Did you think you could hide from me?" The voice was low, dripping with malice. My blood ran cold as the recognition hit me. It was the same voice from before, that raspy, mocking tone that sent chills down my spine. "Who are you?" I shouted, feeling my heart pound in my chest. "What do you want?" "Just checking in," the voice purred, each word dripping with menace. "You're not alone tonight, you know. I'm right outside." My stomach dropped. I turned abruptly, scanning the yard again. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the darkness itself were closing in on me. "Leave me alone!" I screamed into the phone, but it only fueled the laughter on the other end. With a sudden rush of panic, I slammed the door shut and locked it, the sound echoing through the empty house. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my mind racing. What was happening? How did this person know I was home? How long had he been watching me? I stumbled back into the living room, the silence wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I could still hear the distant laughter ringing in my ears, a haunting reminder of the nightmare I was trapped in. I dropped onto the couch, my phone still in hand. The screen showed a missed call notification. Several of them, actually. Each one from that same unknown number. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Then I saw it. A notification from the security app one had set up earlier. The camera had detected motion outside. I felt a jolt of fear as I opened the app, my hands shaking. The live feed showed my yard, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I would see nothing. Maybe this was all a cruel trick. But as the feed loaded, my heart sank. There, right at the edge of my porch, stood the shadowy figure I had seen earlier. My breath caught in my throat. It was watching me, still and silent, a dark shape against the backdrop of the night. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his gaze piercing through me. Panic surged through my veins. I fumbled with my phone, desperately trying to take a screenshot to document this moment, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. I knew I had to do something, call the police again, or even just gather my things and leave. But another part of me, paralyzed with fear, insisted I stay hidden. Suddenly, the figure took a step closer, and my blood ran cold. I pressed myself against the couch, praying that the darkness would shield me. I could hardly breathe as I watched him move, feeling utterly trapped. Then, in a swift motion, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, just as quickly as he had appeared. My heart raced as I scrolled through the camera feed, desperate to catch a glimpse of him again. But he was gone, and in his place, only the creeping dread remained. What was he waiting for? What did he want from me? The questions swirled in my mind, tightening like a noose around my throat. I was running out of time, and I knew deep down that soon the game would change. I had to find a way to confront my fears before they consumed me whole. The darkness in my living room felt suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on me as I replayed the chilling events in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of the figure lingering just outside my home. I needed to regain control, to confront this nightmare head-on. But how? I glanced at the clock. It was nearing midnight. The longer I waited, the more power I felt this mysterious presence had over me. I could feel panic rising, threatening to swallow me whole. I needed a plan. Gathering what little courage I had left, I walked to the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. I pulled open the drawer where I kept my kitchen knives, fingers trembling as I reached for the sharpest one. It felt cold against my skin, a small comfort in a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly hostile. With the knife clutched tightly in my hand, I made my way back to the living room. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears, drowning out any other sound. I peered out the window, desperate to spot any sign of movement in the dark. The yard was still, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Then, as I turned to scan the room, my phone buzzed again, vibrating violently on the coffee table. I flinched, staring at the screen. Another call from the unknown number. I felt a mix of fear and rage. This had to stop. Stop calling me. I shouted into the phone, my voice trembling. Who are you? What do you want? But again, there was only silence. Then that same mocking laughter echoed back at me, sending chills down my spine. I'm just playing a little game, sweetie. Let's see how long you can hide. I slammed the phone down, the screen cracking against the table's edge. My hands were slick with sweat as I paced the room, trying to gather my thoughts. What game? This was no game. This was a nightmare I couldn't escape from. Suddenly, a thought struck me. I recalled the security systems app and quickly opened it again, trying to focus on the live feed. Maybe I could spot him before he could spot me. I needed to see where he was. As I scrolled through the previous recordings, my stomach twisted in knots. The feed showed nothing out of the ordinary, just my empty yard and the surrounding darkness. But then I noticed a flicker. One of the recordings from earlier showed him stepping out from behind a tree, lurking just out of sight. He was there, in my yard, with the moonlight barely illuminating his silhouette. It was clear he was toying with me, watching, waiting for me to make a move. I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the fear bubbling inside me. This was my home, and I wasn't about to let him take that away from me. I glanced at the front door, taking a deep breath as I steeled myself for what lay ahead. With the knife still in hand, I slowly moved toward the door. Every creak of the floor felt amplified in the silence, echoing my anxiety. I reached for the handle, ready to swing it open and confront whatever lay beyond. "Come out!" I shouted, surprising myself with my own bravado. "I know you're out there. Face me." Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. For a moment, I thought I might have scared him away. But then I heard a rustle outside, a sound that made my heart leap into my throat. "Are you scared, sweetie?" The voice drifted through the door, dripping with malice. "I told you this was a game. Are you ready to play?" Before I could think, I flung the door open, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The cold air hit me like a wall, but I stood firm, my heart racing. The yard was empty, bathed in moonlight. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift, teasing me with the possibility that he was just out of sight. I scanned the darkness, knife raised and ready. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice breaking. "I'm not afraid of you." But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement, a figure darting behind the tree at the edge of the yard. I took a step forward, knife gripped tightly, determination pushing me on. "Stop hiding!" I yelled, rushing toward the tree. As I approached, I could feel my heart pounding louder, thundering in my ears. I rounded the tree, ready to confront him. But he was gone. The yard was empty once again, and a wave of frustration and fear crashed over me. I felt like a fool, standing there alone in the darkness, shouting at thin air. Then came the laughter again, echoing all around me, bouncing off the trees and sending shivers down my spine. "You really think you can escape?" I turned sharply, feeling a rush of panic. Where was he? I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if I were being toyed with like a pawn in his sick game. I began to back away toward the house, my instincts screaming for me to retreat. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash behind me. I whipped around, heart racing, and saw that a window in the back of my house had shattered. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized he had found a way inside. I stumbled backward, feeling my breath hitch. "No! No!" I screamed, panic consuming me as I raced back into the house, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it tight. This was no longer a game. This was real, and I was trapped. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I had to confront him now. I could no longer hide. I dashed to the living room, frantically searching for something to defend myself. The knife was useless if he got too close. I needed to be ready. I could hear his footsteps now, slow and deliberate, echoing in the hallway. I gripped the knife tighter, my hands slick with sweat. It was time to end this. No more running, no more hiding. He was coming for me, and I would be ready. The tension in the air was palpable, a heavy silence that felt almost suffocating. I could hear the footsteps creeping closer, echoing in the darkened hallway like a countdown to my doom. I pressed my back against the wall, knife raised, trying to steady my breathing, but my heart raced uncontrollably in my chest. "Did you really think you could escape me?" The voice, cold and mocking, sent chills cascading down my spine. "You've played your part so well, but now it's time to end the game." I could barely think straight. My mind raced, torn between fight and flight. I had no choice but to confront him. If I let him take me, I'd become just another victim in his twisted game. I needed to find a way out, but first I had to stand my ground. With every step he took, I felt the darkness closing in around me. I peered around the corner, trying to catch a glimpse of him. The hallway was dimly lit, shadows flickering like sinister specters. My grip tightened around the knife as I prepared for what might come next. "Why don't you come out and play?" he taunted, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "I promise I won't bite." Too hard. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the hallway, summoning every ounce of courage I had left. "I'm done playing your games," I shouted, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at me. "Show yourself." For a moment, silence hung in the air. And then, from the shadows, he emerged, a tall figure, cloaked in darkness. His eyes glinted with an unsettling gleam, a predator relishing in the fear of its prey. "Ah, there you are," he said, stepping closer, the shadows clinging to him like a shroud. "I was wondering when you'd finally decide to join me." The fear threatened to consume me, but I pushed it down. "Get away from me," I shouted, brandishing the knife. "I won't let you take me." He laughed, a deep, resonant sound that filled the hallway and sent chills through me. "You think that little knife will protect you? You don't even know what I am, do you? I don't care who or what you are." I shot back, my voice trembling with defiance. "I'm not going to be your victim." He tilted his head, a mocking smile spreading across his face. "You're already trapped, sweetie. This is your home, and I know every dark corner of it." Suddenly, I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. I wouldn't let him intimidate me any longer. I had to fight. With a swift motion, I lunged at him, knife aimed for his chest. But he sidestepped, his movements almost too fast for me to comprehend. I stumbled forward, barely regaining my balance, and turned to face him again. "Is that all you've got?" he sneered, his laughter echoing through the hallway. How quaint! I could feel despair creeping in, but I refused to let it take hold. I had to think quickly. I remembered the kitchen. There were tools and supplies I could use. My eyes darted toward the kitchen door at the end of the hallway. "Enough of this," I yelled, my voice rising with determination. I sprinted toward the kitchen, heart racing, knowing I had to outsmart him. I could hear his footsteps behind me, the sound growing louder, but I couldn't let fear slow me down. I burst into the kitchen, my eyes scanning the room for anything I could use. I spotted a canister of cooking oil and a few glass jars lined up on the counter. Grabbing the canister, I quickly poured oil on the floor, hoping to create a slick barrier between us. As I turned to face him, he entered the kitchen, a sinister grin on his face. "Running away, are we? How predictable." But before he could advance, I threw a glass jar at his feet. It shattered with a loud crash, and the shrapnel scattered across the floor. The slick oil sent him sliding slightly, just enough for me to seize my chance. Stay back, I yelled, readying the knife again, my breath coming in quick bursts. His expression shifted, the amusement fading slightly. You think you can stop me? You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know enough, I shot back, and I won't let you take me or anyone else. With that, I lunged again, this time aiming for his arm. He barely managed to deflect my strike, but I could see the surprise in his eyes. I was fighting back, and he wasn't expecting it. Our struggle continued, the knife clashing against his arm, and I could feel the heat of desperation fueling my every move. He was strong, but I was fueled by sheer willpower and the instinct to survive. I had to push through. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of the back door through the kitchen window, a flicker of hope. With one last surge of strength, I managed to push him back, creating a momentary opening. "Get out of my way!" I shouted as I bolted toward the door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I yanked the door open, bursting into the cool night air. I didn't look back, I just ran. My heart raced as I fled into the darkness, the weight of the night pressing down on me. But just as I thought I was free, I heard his voice, chilling and mocking, echoing from behind me. "You can't run forever, sweetie. I'll always find you." I sprinted down the driveway, fear propelling me forward. I knew I had to get to safety, to a place where he couldn't reach me. I had to call for help. The world around me felt surreal, a blur of shadows and moonlight as I ran through the streets. I could hear my own breath ragged in my chest, fear coursing through me. I had survived this encounter, but the battle wasn't over. I had to keep fighting, keep running. I wasn't done yet. This nightmare might not end tonight, but I would do everything in my power to make sure it never claimed me, or anyone else, again.
The Last Halloween Train.
I can still remember the buzz of excitement in the air that Halloween night. My friends and I had been looking forward to this for weeks. The special train ride to a legendary Halloween party deep in the woods. As we donned our costumes, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. Each of us had come dressed to impress. I was sporting an elaborate vampire outfit that I had spent days perfecting. The moment we boarded the train, the atmosphere was electric. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and as the train pulled away from the station, we snapped selfies and made goofy poses. It was all so exhilarating. I felt alive, surrounded by my friends and the thrill of Halloween. The city lights faded into darkness, replaced by twisted trees and shadows dancing outside our windows. As we settled into our seats, the conductor announced that we would be making a stop at a small, remote station to pick up more passengers. My heart raced at the thought of adding more thrill seekers to our journey. I figured it would just make the party even better. But as the train chugged along, I noticed the mood shifting. The laughter started to die down, and an unshakable tension began to creep in. When we finally came to a stop at the desolate station, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air outside was still, too still, and the flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the ground. I glanced around at my friends. We all exchanged nervous glances. "Is this place even open?" I wondered aloud. We decided to step outside to stretch our legs, but as soon as we did, I felt an overwhelming sense of unease. It was as if we had crossed into another realm, far removed from the festive atmosphere we had left behind. I called out for our friends to stay close, but I noticed a few of them wandering off, drawn by something in the dark. Suddenly, the train's doors slammed shut. My heart raced as I realized that some of our friends were still outside, desperately trying to get back on board. "Wait, "Let them in!" I shouted, but the train lurched forward just as they reached for the handle. I felt a pit form in my stomach as we left them behind, stranded in that creepy, isolated station. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just Halloween jitters, but as we continued on our way, I couldn't help but feel we had stumbled into something much darker than a simple party. A knot tightened in my chest, a premonition that this was only the beginning of a nightmare we couldn't escape. As the train rumbled away from the desolate station, I glanced at the faces of my friends. Their expressions mirrored my own mix of confusion and fear. I couldn't shake the image of our friends left behind, their faces contorted with panic as the train pulled away. It felt wrong, deeply unsettling. "What just happened?" Jess asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did we really just leave them?" I nodded, unable to form the words. The lights in the carriage flickered, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the walls. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and I could tell the others were beginning to feel it too. The atmosphere shifted. The laughter and excitement we had shared earlier were replaced by an oppressive silence. We huddled together, trying to make sense of the situation. Suddenly, the train jolted violently, and I grabbed the seat to steady myself. The overhead lights blinked again, flickering like the heartbeat of something alive, something sinister. "Maybe we should try to contact the conductor," Mike suggested, his voice shaky. "He'll know what's going on." I watched as he stood up and walked toward the front of the train. The rest of us exchanged uneasy glances but stayed seated, our apprehension palpable. Moments later, Mike returned, his face pale. He's not there," he stammered. "The conductor is gone." A shiver ran down my spine as I processed his words. What did that mean? That's when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow moved in the aisle behind us. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. Just the empty space where we had once felt the warmth of camaraderie. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jess nodded, her eyes wide. "I thought it was just me. It felt like something was watching us." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see our friends waving back at us, but instead, all I saw were the dark trees rushing by, the branches clawing at the glass as if trying to pull us back. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. We all jumped, eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" I shouted, adrenaline surging through me. The scream had come from somewhere deep within the train, and before I knew it, we were all scrambling to find the source. As we rushed through the narrow aisles, the flickering lights dimmed even further, casting long shadows that twisted and contorted around us. We found a small group of passengers gathered at one end of the car, whispering frantically among themselves. I pushed my way through, desperate to know what was happening. "That girl, she just vanished," one of them exclaimed, pointing toward the empty space where a young woman had been sitting just moments before. I felt my stomach drop. Another passenger, a man in a dark suit, was pacing back and forth, his eyes wild with fear. "What do you mean she vanished?" I demanded. "Where did she go?" He looked at me with a mixture of dread and disbelief. One moment she was right there, and the next, gone. It's like she never existed. Panic surged through me as I glanced around at my friends. We had already lost one person, and now it seemed we were losing more. The fear was palpable, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I knew in that moment that we were not just passengers on a train. We were trapped in a nightmare, and it was only beginning. Panic coursed through the car, thick and suffocating. I could feel my heart racing in my chest as I looked around, searching for any sign of our friends or some glimmer of hope. It was like we were in a twisted dream, one where reality had taken a back seat to something far more sinister. "Guys, we need to stick together," I said, my voice trembling. "We can't let this train separate us. We have to find a way to get off this thing." The fear in my friend's eyes mirrored my own, but the urgency of my words seemed to resonate. The group of passengers was starting to disperse, each lost in their own panic. I could see Mike and Jess standing close together, fear etched on their faces, and I felt a surge of protectiveness wash over me. "Let's find the emergency exit," I urged, but deep down, I was beginning to doubt if there was any way off this train. As we moved down the aisle, the air grew colder, and a deep sense of foreboding settled in my stomach. I could hear whispers, but they didn't come from my friends. They seemed to echo from the corners of the car, haunting murmurs that sent chills down my spine. Suddenly, we reached the door leading to the next car. It was heavy and locked tight, but we could hear noises from the other side, distant shuffling and what sounded like muffled cries. "Do you think—" Jess started, but I cut her off. "We can't go in there. We have to find another way." Just then, a loud bang reverberated through the car, shaking the walls. I spun around, my heart in my throat. What was that? I breathed, my eyes wide. The other passengers were frozen, their eyes darting around in fear. Before I could even process what was happening, the lights flickered violently, and I felt the train lurch again. In the chaos, I saw a flash of movement at the far end of the car. A shadow darted by, and I gasped, the blood draining from my face. It was quick, too quick. It felt like a predatory gaze, watching us from the dark. "We need to get to the front of the train," Mike said, his voice steady despite the terror etched on his face. "If we can find the conductor, maybe he can help us." The idea made sense, and I felt a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. We quickly made our way toward the front, trying to ignore the unease settling around us like fog. As we moved, I could see the fear reflected in the faces of the other passengers. Some were sitting in their seats, whispering prayers, while others had their heads buried in their hands. The atmosphere felt thick, as if the air itself was heavy with dread. When we reached the door to the front car, I pushed it open and stepped inside, my heart pounding. What I found was horrifying. The front of the train was empty, just like Mike had said earlier. But there were signs of struggle, papers scattered across the floor, a dropped lantern swinging slowly as if disturbed by a gust of wind, even though there was none. "Where is everyone?" I whispered, feeling the weight of impending doom settling in. We called out for the conductor, but the only response was the echo of our own voices bouncing back at us, mocking us. And then, I noticed something glinting on the floor, a small, ornate box. I picked it up, and as I opened it, a chill swept through the car. Inside lay a collection of small, colorful candies, their vibrant wrappers shining against the grim backdrop. "Where did these come from?" I asked, my voice trembling as I held it up for the others to see. The sight of the candies sent a wave of nausea through me. The laughter and joy of Halloween felt like a distant memory now. I had a terrible feeling that these candies were somehow connected to what was happening. "I don't like this," Jess said, her voice barely a whisper. "We should leave it alone." But it was too late. A low rumble echoed through the train, and the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat. When they came back on, I saw movement behind us, shadows shifting in the corner of my eye. Panic surged once more as I realized that whatever was haunting this train was drawing closer. "Run!" I screamed, and we all bolted back into the corridor, desperate to escape whatever darkness had taken root in the heart of this train. We had to find a way out before it was too late. We ran through the dimly lit corridor, our footsteps echoing against the cold metal floor. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat reminding me of the urgency of our situation. Behind us, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, almost as if they were alive and hungry, pursuing us relentlessly. "Where do we go?" Mike shouted, his voice filled with panic. "What if it's waiting for us up ahead?" I didn't have an answer, and the weight of uncertainty pressed down on me. But there was no time to hesitate. We had to keep moving. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something monstrous gaining on us, but all I saw was darkness. Still, that didn't ease my anxiety. The whispers were louder now, an unsettling cacophony that seemed to echo from the very walls of the train, taunting us, promising that we would not escape. Suddenly, we came to another door, a small emergency exit. My pulse quickened as I pushed on it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me as I pulled harder, but it remained locked. "It's stuck. We have to find another way. Try the next car," Jess shouted, and without wasting another second, we rushed toward it. The door between the cars was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit compartment filled with empty seats. We stepped inside, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "What's wrong?" Mike asked, noticing my unease. "It's just empty." "Is it?" I replied, my eyes scanning the space. "It feels off." As we caught our breath, I took a moment to study the other passengers who had fled with us. They looked just as terrified, their eyes wide and wild. One woman, a mother with a young girl clutching her side, was shaking uncontrollably. "Where are we? What's happening?" she cried, her voice breaking. Before I could respond, the train lurched again, and the lights flickered ominously. "Stay close," I shouted, and instinctively grabbed Jess's hand. "We need to figure this out. We can't let fear take over." We moved to the far end of the car, and that's when I noticed it, a door that led to a small restroom. I was drawn to it, feeling a strange compulsion to check inside. What if there's something in there? I wondered aloud, but the look in Jess's eyes made me hesitate. "Maybe we shouldn't," she cautioned, her voice low. "It could be dangerous." But my curiosity got the better of me. "We need to look for clues. Anything that can help us," I insisted. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bathroom was tiny, cramped, with only a small mirror above the sink and a single flickering light bulb overhead. I scanned the room, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until I noticed the mirror. It was fogged up, and there were faint handprints smudged across the glass. I stepped closer, my heart racing. As I wiped the condensation away with my sleeve, I froze. In the reflection, I could see a shadow lurking behind me, a dark figure just out of sight. I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. "Guys!" I yelled, but the words came out as a terrified whisper. There was nothing there, just the empty restroom and the hum of the train. When I turned back to the mirror, the handprints were still there, but now they looked like they were smudging upward, as if something had been trying to escape. "What's happening?" I murmured to myself, panic rising. I backed away slowly, the reality of our situation crashing down on me. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in, suffocating, and the urge to flee grew stronger. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the next car, and I felt my blood run cold. It was a sound of sheer terror, echoing in the confined space. Without thinking, I bolted back to my friends. "We have to go. Now." We stumbled into the corridor, the screams fading into an eerie silence that felt even more terrifying. I glanced at Jess and Mike. They looked as scared as I felt. "Did you hear that?" Mike asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "But we need to keep moving." As we hurried toward the next car, I could hear something shifting behind us, a rustling noise that sent shivers down my spine. I dared not look back. The feeling of dread intensified with each step, a gnawing certainty that we were not alone. Just as we reached the door to the next car, I heard it again, a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the metal walls of the train. My heart raced, and I pushed the door open, desperate to escape whatever was chasing us. But what I saw beyond that door froze me in place, a vast emptiness, as if we had stepped into a void. The other side was not another car, but an infinite darkness that swallowed all light. "No, we can't go in there," Jess cried, gripping my arm tightly. Before I could respond, a shadow darted past us, quick as lightning. The panic in the air thickened, and the growl grew louder, more menacing. "We have to go," I shouted again, shoving Jess and Mike ahead of me. With nowhere to escape, we were left standing at the precipice of darkness, trapped between the terror behind us and the unknown ahead. The train shuddered once more, and I knew we had to act fast. Time was running out. I could hardly breathe as we stood at the threshold of the void, the darkness swallowing the faint light from the train. The growl behind us escalated, a low, terrifying sound that reverberated through the metal car. There was no time to waste. "We need to jump," I yelled, my voice echoing in the confined space. "What?" Mike shouted back, confusion etched across his face. "Are you crazy? We can't just leap into that. It's either that or whatever is hunting us gets us," I replied, my heart racing. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I couldn't let fear paralyze us. The memories of the screams and the disappearances were fresh in my mind, and I couldn't allow that fate to befall us. Jess tugged on my sleeve, her eyes wide with terror. "What if we don't come back? Then we'll die trying to escape," I said, the weight of my words pressing down on me. I had to believe there was a way out. Without giving myself a chance to second guess, I turned and grabbed Jess and Mike's hands. On the count of 3, we jump. "Wait," Mike began, but I cut him off. 1, 2, 3. We leapt into the darkness, the void enveloping us. For a split second, I felt weightless, and then I crashed into something solid. I gasped as I tumbled onto the ground, the air knocked from my lungs. I struggled to sit up, and when I did, I found myself in an eerie, dimly lit compartment that smelled of damp and decay. The train's interior had transformed. Gone were the metallic walls. Now, we were surrounded by walls made of rotting wood, decorated with peeling wallpaper that faded into darkness. "Where are we?" Jess whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, scanning the room for any sign of an exit. "But we have to find a way out of here." The shadows shifted, and I could feel the dread creeping back in. "Let's check the doors," Mike suggested, moving toward a heavy wooden door on the opposite wall. I followed, dread pooling in my stomach as I glanced around. We each gripped a handle and turned at the same time. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway lined with flickering lights. I glanced at my friends, and we exchanged anxious looks. "Stay close," I urged, stepping inside. As we moved down the passage, whispers echoed around us, faint voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. "Can you hear that?" I asked, straining to catch individual words, but it all blended into a haunting melody of despair. Then, suddenly, a door slammed shut behind us. The sound echoed like thunder, and we jumped, spinning around to face the darkness we had just traversed. "We're trapped," Mike shouted, panic rising in his voice. "No, we can't be," I argued, trying to stay composed. "There has to be a way out. We can't let this place win." We hurried down the passageway, adrenaline fueling our desperation. The whispers grew louder, intertwining with the chilling atmosphere, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "What do they want?" Jess whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I don't know," I replied, urgency creeping into my tone. "But we can't let them catch us." We reached another door, this one old and splintered. I pushed it open, revealing a large room bathed in dim light. It was filled with forgotten furniture, dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ghosts. But what caught my attention was the mural on the far wall, a chilling depiction of a train and passengers, all with expressions of terror etched on their faces. "What the hell is this place?" Mike asked, stepping inside. "I think it's a trap," I replied, my voice low. "I think we're reliving whatever happened to the people who came before us." The realization hit me hard, and my heart sank. We were trapped in a cycle, a nightmarish loop that wouldn't end until we broke free. "We need to find something, anything that can help us understand what's happening," I urged. As we searched the room, a chill swept through, and I felt a presence looming behind us. I turned just in time to see a shadow flicker across the mural, and my breath caught in my throat. "Get back!" I screamed, pulling Jess and Mike away from the wall. In that moment, the whispers transformed into frantic screams. The shadow coalesced into a figure, dark, featureless, but exuding an overwhelming sense of dread. It lunged toward us, and we scrambled back, our hearts pounding in terror. "Run!" I shouted, and we dashed back through the door. The passageway was now twisting and turning, the darkness closing in around us. The figure's screams echoed behind us, urging us to move faster. Finally, we spotted a door at the end of the corridor, illuminated by a flickering light. "That's got to be it!" I yelled, sprinting toward it. We pushed through, bursting into the open air. We stumbled onto the platform of a deserted train station, the moonlight illuminating the scene. The sound of the train echoed in the distance, but we were free, at least for the moment. I looked back, half expecting to see the figure chasing us, but all I saw was darkness. "Is it over?" Jess asked, breathless and shaken. I think so," I replied, feeling the weight of relief wash over me. But as I turned to look at my friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't completely safe. The train whistle blew again, and in that moment, I understood that Halloween had a darker side, one that could ensnare anyone who dared to board the last Halloween train. As the shadows whispered around us, I knew we had escaped this time, but I could never forget the horrors we had faced. The memories would linger, a reminder that sometimes the true terror lies in what we cannot see, what remains hidden in the darkness, waiting for the next unsuspecting passengers to arrive.
the candies of death.
I still remember that chilly Halloween night, the air thick with excitement as my kids dashed from house to house, their laughter echoing in the crisp fall air. My heart swelled with joy watching them. Sam, with his superhero cape billowing behind him, and Lily, dressed as a princess, her golden tiara shimmering under the streetlights. They were so proud of their candy haul, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia for the nights I spent trick-or-treating with my friends. As they finally burst through the front door, bags overflowing with treats, I couldn't help but smile. "Let's see what you got," I exclaimed, kneeling down to examine their treasures. But as I sorted through the colorful wrappers, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Among the usual chocolates and gummies were several strange, vividly colored sweets. Some glowed with an unnatural brightness, while others shimmered as if they were coated in something alive. "What are these?" I asked, holding up a twisted piece of candy that pulsed ominously in my hand. "Some lady gave them to us down the street," Lily said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "She said they were special." I brushed off my unease, attributing it to a mix of exhaustion and protective instinct. "Well, let's stick to the classics for now, okay?" I suggested, tossing the peculiar candies into a separate bowl. That night, as they settled into bed, I found it hard to shake the feeling of dread that had crept into my mind. I tucked them in, kissing them good night, and turned off the lights, hoping my concerns were unfounded. But in the stillness of the night, I could hear them whispering to each other, giggling softly as if sharing secrets I couldn't understand. It was innocent enough, but the sound sent a chill down my spine. When morning came, I was greeted by a heavy silence that settled in the house like a thick fog. I rubbed my eyes, shaking off the remnants of sleep, and made my way to their room. My heart raced with each step, an inexplicable anxiety gripping me. As I pushed open the door, I froze. Sam and Lily were lying in their beds, but something was terribly wrong. Their faces were pale, almost ghostly, and their eyes glinted with a strange hunger I had never seen before. They sat up slowly, movements almost too fluid, too unnatural. It was as if they were puppets being controlled by invisible strings. "Dad," Sam said, but his voice lacked the warmth it usually carried. "We feel different." A cold shiver crawled down my spine as the words hung in the air. "Different how?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily leaned closer, her smile stretched wider than I had ever seen, revealing teeth that looked sharper than before. "We're hungry, Dad. Very hungry." The world around me began to tilt, and I realized with horror that something was dreadfully wrong. Those strange candies, they weren't just sweets. They were something far more sinister, and now my children were caught in their terrifying grip. Panic clawed at my insides as I stared at my children, their eerie smiles twisting my heart into knots. "What do you mean you're hungry?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain calm. "What do you want?" Sam's eyes narrowed, and his gaze pierced through me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "We want more candy, Dad. The good kind." A knot tightened in my throat as I glanced toward the bowl of strange sweets sitting on the kitchen counter, the remnants of their Halloween haul. I could feel their pull, a magnetic force that made my skin crawl. I had thought I could protect my kids by keeping those candies away, but now I wondered if it was already too late. I stepped back, needing space to think. "You both need to eat breakfast. How about some pancakes?" I suggested, hoping to distract them from whatever sinister craving was festering inside. But their eyes flashed with an unsettling hunger, and they exchanged glances filled with something unrecognizable, something dark. "No, Dad," Lily said, her voice soft yet eerily sweet. "We want the candy. We need it." A creeping dread washed over me. I needed to act quickly before they spiraled further into this strange transformation. "Stay here," I ordered, my heart pounding in my chest as I hurried into the kitchen. I grabbed the bowl of strange candies, their vibrant colors glowing as I held them in my trembling hands. As I stood in the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. Everything felt too still, too quiet. Then I heard it, the soft sound of laughter echoing from the children's room, their giggles warped and twisted, as if they were sharing some dark secret. I rushed back to the bedroom, my heart racing. "Guys, what's going on?" I demanded, but as I crossed the threshold, I stopped dead in my tracks. The room felt charged with an unnatural energy, a palpable tension that made my skin prickle. Sam and Lily were no longer just sitting in their beds. They were standing now, their movements fluid and oddly graceful, like predators ready to pounce. My children, the innocent faces I had known, were fading, replaced by something unearthly. "Dad, come join us," Sam urged, his voice low and haunting. "It's fun. You just have to try the candy." I felt sick to my stomach. "No, I'm not eating those," I shouted, trying to regain control over the situation. The laughter ceased, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against me. Their eyes glinted with a darkness I had never seen, and for the first time, I felt genuine fear for my children. Suddenly, Sam lunged toward me, his movements too quick, too predatory. I stumbled back, colliding with the wall, and watched in horror as Lily mirrored his actions, both of them closing in on me, their smiles widening to reveal sharpened teeth that glinted in the morning light. "Please stop," I begged, my voice shaking as they encircled me. "You're my kids. Fight it." But it was clear they were lost to something darker, something that had taken hold of them during that cursed Halloween night. In that moment, I knew I had to find a way to break this spell before it consumed them entirely, before it turned them into something unrecognizable. But how could I save my children when they were standing right in front of me, transformed into creatures I could barely recognize? The sight of my children, no, the twisted reflections of my children, sent me into a panic. I had to get out of that room before I lost them completely. I pushed past Sam and Lily, their eyes gleaming with hunger, and stumbled down the hall, my heart racing as I sprinted to the living room. I collapsed onto the couch, gasping for breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. I had to find answers. I grabbed my phone and began searching for anything that could explain what was happening. My hands shook as I typed, "Halloween candy turns children into monsters." The screen flickered to life, and the results filled with stories that made my blood run cold. As I scrolled through the horror stories shared by other parents, I came across a thread that caught my eye. Local parents were discussing bizarre occurrences following Halloween. Kids acting strangely, showing signs of aggression, and craving sweets in an insatiable way. A chilling sense of familiarity washed over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a coincidence. Among the chaos of comments, one post stood out. A mother described how her daughter had received a strange candy from a mysterious old woman during Halloween. The girl had changed overnight, becoming distant and withdrawn, and she noted that the old woman's candy shop had closed just days later, leaving no trace. It was as if the shop, and the woman, had vanished. My heart pounded as I read the name of the street where that candy shop used to be located. It was a run-down part of town, a place I had avoided for years. But I knew I had no choice. If I was going to save my children, I had to confront whatever dark force was behind this. I glanced back down the hallway toward the kids' room. I could hear their muffled whispers, the sound sending chills down my spine. With every passing moment, I felt time slipping away. I had to act fast. Grabbing my keys, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for what was to come. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit me like a wave, and I was reminded of the crisp Halloween night just days before. My heart raced as I drove through the empty streets, each passing house a reminder of the celebration that had turned into a nightmare. When I finally reached the old candy shop, a sense of dread settled over me. The building loomed before me, dilapidated and covered in layers of grime, the sign barely hanging on. I parked my car and stepped out, the air thick with the scent of decay and something sweeter, more sinister. I pushed open the creaky door, and it swung wide, revealing a dark interior filled with dusty shelves and forgotten memories. A faint light flickered in the corner, illuminating jars of candies that looked both inviting and repulsive. My stomach churned as I approached the counter, scanning the cluttered space for any sign of the mysterious candy maker. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling in the silence. "Is anyone here?" For a moment, nothing but the echo of my voice filled the room. Just as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of movement from the shadows. An old woman stepped forward, her eyes glinting with a knowing spark. She was hunched, dressed in tattered clothes, but there was an unsettling aura about her that made my skin crawl. "I've been expecting you," she said, her voice rasping like dried leaves. "You're here for your children, aren't you?" I took a step back, fear gripping my chest. "What did you do to them? What's in those candies?" The woman's lips curled into a sinister smile. "The candies are special. They awaken desires hidden deep within. But some desires are not meant to be realized." "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperate for answers. She leaned closer, her breath foul with the stench of something rotting. "Your children consumed a part of them that was never meant to awaken. To save them, you must embrace the darkness within yourself and choose. Will you save them or will you join them?" Her words hung in the air like a fog, wrapping around me as the gravity of my situation pressed down on my shoulders. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of an abyss, and I needed to decide fast. As her laughter echoed in my ears, I realized that time was running out. I had to find a way to rescue my children from the very monster that was lurking within them before it was too late. The old woman's words reverberated in my mind, leaving a trail of cold dread in their wake. "Embrace the darkness within yourself," she had said, as if the mere thought sent icy fingers creeping up my spine. But there was no time to contemplate the twisted nature of her advice. My children were slipping further away from me with each passing second. "Tell me how to save them," I shouted, my voice breaking with desperation. I needed clarity, a solution to this horrifying puzzle. She studied me with eyes that seemed to pierce through the layers of my soul. "You must return to your home. Find the source of their cravings and confront it. Only then can you begin to reverse the curse." I nodded, swallowing hard as the weight of my task settled over me. What if I can't? What if it's too late? I felt a tremor in my hands, fear pooling in my stomach like a heavy stone. "It's never too late," she whispered, her voice laced with an unsettling calm. "But the longer you wait, the harder it will be to reclaim them." With that, she retreated into the shadows, her presence fading like a lingering nightmare. I stumbled back into the night, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I had to get back to my kids, but the streets felt endless, twisting around me like the dark thoughts in my head. When I finally reached home, the familiar sight of my front door sent a wave of relief crashing over me. But as I stepped inside, that relief was quickly replaced by terror. The house felt different. Darkness hung thick in the air, and the whispers I had heard earlier now echoed through the hallways like a ghostly choir. "Dad!" came a voice from the shadows, soft and inviting. It was Lily, but her tone felt wrong, coated in a sheen of something sinister. "Come play with us." I swallowed hard, forcing my feet to move toward her voice. As I stepped into the living room, I froze. Sam and Lily stood in the center of the room, their bodies pulsing with a strange, otherworldly energy. Their eyes glinted with a feral hunger, and their smiles were wide, revealing those unnaturally sharp teeth. "Look, Dad, we found more candy," Sam exclaimed, holding up another piece of that cursed treat, glimmering ominously in the low light. "You should try it. It feels amazing." "No, you don't understand," I shouted, the fear surging through me like ice. "Those candies are dangerous. They're changing you." Lily stepped closer, tilting her head like a curious animal. "But they make us feel so good, Dad. You have to join us. It's so much fun." I couldn't let myself be swayed by their false allure. I had to break through to them, to reach the children I knew were still trapped inside these monstrous forms. "Listen to me," I pleaded. "This isn't who you are. Fight it. We can get through this together." Their laughter echoed around the room, a chilling sound that made my skin crawl. "Together," Sam mocked, his voice dark and twisted. "This is who we are now, Dad. We're better than we were before. You're the only one holding back." "No, I won't give in," I yelled, my heart racing as I stepped back, searching for a way to escape. The candies had taken my children, but I refused to lose them completely. In a burst of desperation, I lunged for the bowl of cursed sweets on the table, grabbing it with both hands. "You want these," I shouted, holding them up like a weapon. "Then you'll have to go through me." The room fell silent as I challenged their twisted desires. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, the remnants of their humanity flickering behind their predatory eyes. "I'm not afraid of you," I declared, my voice echoing in the stillness. Sam and Lily exchanged glances, a flicker of confusion crossing their faces. For a brief moment, I saw the children I loved peeking through the darkness, and my heart leapt with hope. But it was quickly crushed as their expressions twisted back into hunger. "Then we'll just have to make you join us," Sam snarled, and they advanced, their movements eerily synchronized, like wolves closing in on their prey. I knew I had to act fast. I had to find a way to confront this darkness head-on and pull my children back from the brink. But as they closed in, the weight of their monstrous forms felt heavier, and the shadows danced around me, ready to swallow me whole. My heart raced as I backed away, the reality of my situation crashing over me like a tidal wave. Sam and Lily, once innocent and filled with laughter, now stood before me as twisted, hungry creatures. I could see the struggle within their eyes, but the darkness was creeping in, threatening to consume them completely. "Please, you have to fight it," I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. "Remember who you are. Remember our family. This isn't you." Their expressions flickered between monstrous intent and something softer, a glimmer of the children I had raised. For a fleeting moment, Sam hesitated, his hand twitching toward the cursed candy still clutched in my grip. "Dad," he started, but the hunger quickly overtook him again, his face twisting in a snarl. "We want more. We want to feel good." "No!" I screamed, my voice echoing through the house, bouncing off the walls like a desperate prayer. "This isn't what you want. It's the candy talking. Fight it." The shadows around us seemed to shift, swirling with malevolent energy, as if the very house was reacting to their transformation. I couldn't let fear take hold. I had to remind them of their true selves. "Remember Halloween last year?" I asked, my mind racing to find anything to hold on to. "We carved pumpkins together, and you both were so proud of your designs. You loved telling ghost stories by the fire. Those memories are still inside you." A flicker of recognition crossed Lily's face, her brow furrowing as she struggled against the primal urge. "But the candy, it makes us feel so good, Dad," she murmured, her voice laced with confusion. "Good," I pressed, seizing the moment. "Or is it just easier to let it control you? Remember how it felt to be happy without it. We can make new memories. Just fight this." I clutched the bowl of candies tighter, willing my strength to flow into them, praying it would reach their hearts. "You're stronger than this. We're a family. We can fight it together." Suddenly, a guttural growl erupted from Sam, and he lunged forward, claws bared. I barely dodged him, adrenaline surging through my veins. I had to protect myself, but more importantly, I had to reach them before it was too late. I glanced around, looking for something, anything, that could help me break the spell of the candy. The old woman had mentioned confronting the source of their cravings. It wasn't just the candy itself, it was the very essence of what it represented, the allure of darkness. With a surge of determination, I dropped the bowl and sprinted to the kitchen, where the remnants of our family life still lingered. I grabbed a bottle of vinegar from the pantry and a box of baking soda, my mind racing with the connection between these ordinary substances and the grotesque transformation before me. "Sam! Lily!" I shouted, pouring the vinegar into a mixing bowl. "You don't need the candy. You need something real. Remember how we used to make science experiments together? This is just like that." They hesitated again, and for a moment, the shadows around them seemed to waver, flickering like candlelight. The primal hunger faded slightly, replaced by confusion. I quickly added the baking soda, watching the mixture bubble and fizz. "See, this is what real fun looks like. This is what we can do together." The sound of the bubbling liquid drew their attention. I could see them inching closer, curiosity battling against their monstrous urges. "Just a little more," I urged, feeling the heat of hope rise in my chest. "This is just like our old experiments. We can make something amazing." As they approached, I could see their true selves struggling to break free, trapped beneath the surface of their monstrous forms. "You're still my kids," I cried, tears streaming down my face. "Fight it. Remember the love, the laughter, and the joy we shared." In that moment, as I poured the last of the baking soda into the bowl, the mixture erupted in a foamy explosion, sending bubbles spilling everywhere. The sudden chaos seemed to snap them from their stupor. Lily gasped, a flicker of recognition sparking in her eyes. "Dad!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" "Yes, you're coming back," I exclaimed, hope flooding my voice. "You have to fight. The candy wants to keep you trapped, but you can break free. Just hold on to what we had." As they took a step back, The shadows receded slightly, revealing the children I knew buried deep within. I could see the battle playing out on their faces, their humanity clawing its way back to the surface. "Let it go," I shouted, pouring every ounce of my love and hope into my voice. "You are not the darkness. You are my children. You belong to the light." Their bodies trembled as the darkness began to dissipate, swirling away like fog in the morning sun. I stepped forward, reaching out toward them, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Come back to me," I cried, and in that moment, the room erupted in a blinding flash of light. As the light faded, I blinked and found myself standing in the living room again, the candy bowl shattered on the floor. I dropped to my knees, breathless, and stared wide-eyed at the two figures in front of me. Sam and Lily stood there, wide-eyed and trembling, but no longer monstrous. They were my children again, filled with confusion and fear, but undeniably they were back. "Dad," Lily whispered, her voice soft and vulnerable. "What just happened?" I rushed forward, wrapping my arms around them as they broke into tears. "It's okay. It's okay. You're safe. I'm here. We're together." As I held them close, relief washed over me, but I knew the battle wasn't truly over. The shadows still lingered, and the memory of that cursed candy would haunt me for a long time. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. We had survived, and together, we would confront whatever darkness lay ahead. Because as long as we stood united, there was no monster we couldn't face.